Okay, hi everyone. Good night from Hong Kong. I'll be talking about, I'll be giving the talk on behalf of our team. So my collaborator Alex well, we cannot make it here today, but lots of credits, especially the ones on semantics, go to her. All right, let's talk about learning biases. Learning is biased. In language learning, certain structures or meanings have been shown to be more readily learnable than others. For example, the SVO word order is easier to learn than the SO. Learners pick up suffixes more easily than prefixes. Harmonic patterns where adjectival modifiers and numeral modifiers both precede or follow the head noun have been shown to be easier than non-harmonic patterns. Such biases can offer important insights into learnability, how a language is acquired by learners at a given time, and typology, how common patterns emerge across languages over time. In fact, a close relationship between these two has long been assumed. An easier to learn linguistic property is more likely to be maintained in diachronic language change and manifested in more languages. Similarly, an unlearnable property is more likely to die out over time and leave a typological gap. The reverse also holds. A pattern common to many languages is more likely to be learnable, and a typological gap might reflect a hard-to-learn property. And this is what we do in this paper. In the context of an observed typological gap, we explore whether there is a potential learning bias underlying it. The gap of interest is the following. Negative superlative determiners are cross-linguistically unattested. That is, across languages, a determiner with both the negative polarity and the superlative feature is lacking. In other words, there are no successful correspondence of sentence one involving an element like least or fewest in the determiner position. This holds despite the fact that the superlative determiner with a positive polarity like 2 and non-superlative determiners with a negative polarity like 3 are both grammatical. Our research questions, therefore, are, given this gap, is there a learning bias underlying it? In other words, is one hard to learn? And if so, might the challenge be attributed to its negative polarity or its superlativity? Such questions can be addressed by comparing the learnability of 1 to its positive counterpart 2 and its non-superlative counterpart 3. We put forward 4 hypotheses. H0 states that there is no learning bias. That is, 1 is as learnable as those of 2 and 3. The other hypothesis states that there is some sort of learning bias, but they differ in nature. H1 states that it is negativity and superlativity together that contribute to the difficulty of 1, such that 1 is hard to learn, whereas 2 and 3 easy. H2 states that negativity is the sole factor such that 1 and 3, by virtue of having the negative polarity, should be hard, but 2 is easy. H3 attributes this bias to superlativity alone, such that 1 and 2 should be hard and 3 easy. So to test these hypotheses, we teach young learners different types of novel determiners and examine the learnability of each. We use the English superlative morpheme ist to mark superlativity, thus the determiner glebest in 1 and 2, and lack of this morpheme glebe in 3. And we set up the extra linguistic context to make salient either a negative polarity meaning or a positive polarity meaning. Now, given our focus on the question about learnability, so in the next few slides, I'll clarify how we optionalize learnability in a current study. We need to talk about a central challenge in word learning. That is, any word form is compatible with infinite meanings. For instance, a novel word glebe used in such a context may refer to the cat, the ball, the soccer player, the action of the soccer player, the quality of green grass, etc., etc. How do learners overcome this challenge? Well, many word learning studies have reported that learners use heuristics that relates a word's syntactic category and its and its semantic category. For example, learners have been shown to tend to map a noun to an object meaning, an adjective to property, a verb to an event meaning. Such studies often contrast two salient candidate meanings and measure learners' choice. For instance, in verb learning tasks, children are taught a novel verb, and the extra linguistic context makes available an event meaning and an object meaning. Children's preference of the event over the object is taken as evidence for successful learning. Following this tradition, we consider successful learning of a determiner to minimally consist in knowing its broad semantic category that it denotes quantity. And we pit this target quantity meaning against an alternative quality meaning. Quality is chosen as the alternative following a prior study, Wellwood et al. 2016. In that study, in the context where a salient quantity, number of cows, and a salient quality, degree of the cow's spottiness were both available, 4-year-olds readily entertained the quantity reading and rejected the quality reading when they heard a novel determiner, glibest of the cows by the barn. This study only examined positive superlative determiners. In our current study, we will teach children novel determiners of different types and pit a target quantity meaning against an alternative quality meaning and interpret children's preference for quantity over quality as evidence for successful learning. Now let's take a closer look at our design. First, an overview. Basically, children learn a novel determiner whose meaning is implicitly introduced in a game setting. During the training phase, two candidate meanings are made salient, quantity and quality, both compatible with the situation. At test, these two meanings are pit against each other, and we look at which meaning children entertain more often. Now, details. During training, the child plays with the puppet Alfred. They together see some cars like these. Alfred is super picky. He likes some cars, but dislikes others. And his preference always has a reason. The experimenter would pick up a card, show it to the child, and say something like, Alfred likes this card because glibest of the cows are by the barn. Or similarly, for a card that Alfred dislikes, the experimenter would say, Alfred doesn't like this card because it is not true that glibest of the cows are by the barn. All cars are about two groups of cows, one in the field, one on the by the barn. All of them are spotty. The barn cows and the field cows differ in two dimensions, number in the group and degree of spottiness. In some cars, the barn cows outnumbered the field cows and are also more spotty. In other cars, the barn cows are fewer in number and are also less spotty. So which cars would steal the puppet's heart? Well, that would depend on the condition. We have 3 between participant conditions. In condition 1, children heard glibest of the cows are by the barn, the superlative determiner, and are told that a card like this wins Alfred's heart. So what does this card tell us about the cows by the barn? Clearly, they are fewer in number and are also less spotty. Therefore, giving rise to a quantity reading and a quality reading that both have the negative polarity. Of course, the negative polarity is from the perspective of the barn cows because by the barn is the predicate of the sentence. So this condition features a negative superlative determiner, our center of interest today. In condition 2, children also received a superlative determiner, but the cars that Alfred likes present a positive polarity. Condition 3 has a non-superlative determiner, and the cars have negative polarity. Note that in each condition, the extra linguistic context makes the quantity and quality reading both equally possible. However, the linguistic context present the novel word as belonging to the syntactic category determiner, and determiners name quantities. Our question is, would children use their linguistic knowledge to entertain the quantity reading, and how would this vary across conditions? To test that, at test, children see some new cards. For each, they are asked to decide whether Alfred will like this card or not. Importantly, unlike the training cards where the quantity and quality have the same polarity, here in the test cards, they go against each other. So now let me use condition 1 as an example to recap. During training, children are told, Alfred likes this card because glibest of the cows are by the barn. And they are presented cards like these with negative polarity. And the opposite is also told and shown to them. In other words, in this condition, children are trained that Alfred likes the card where the barn cows are fewer in number and less spotty than the field cows. At test, they are given cards like this. Here, the barn cows are more in number, but less spotty. If the child decides that Alfred likes this card, it would suggest she had entertained a quality-based reading and inferred Alfred liked it when the barn cows are less spotty. If, however, she decides that Alfred dislikes this card, it must be because she inferred Alfred liked the barn cows to be greater in number, a quantity reading. Okay? All right, so with this design in mind, here are the predictions. Check marks in this table mean successful learning. Recall how we optionalized successful learning in the study, right? So given this, we would expect the check marks in this table to correspond with above chance quantity choices at test. Here are the results. First, between conditions, a significant difference between condition 1 and 2 is found, between 2 and 3 is found, but not between 1 and 3. Second, for each condition compared to chance, above chance performance was only found in condition 2, but not in 1 or 3. Clearly, these results are consistent with hypothesis 2. The conditions with the negative polarities, are hard to learn. Together, we consider these findings to have important implications in 3 respects. First, recall this hypothesis chart. Our data show that H0 is refuted, suggesting that the typological gap in sentence 1 does reflect some learning bias and is not merely coincidental. So learning is biased. Well, we know that outside academia, the word bias often has a negative connotation, but in fact, the language acquisition research has long recognized that biases can facilitate rather than hinder learning. As we said, any linguistic experience is consistent with infinite possibilities, not only for word meanings, but also for structures. In such situations, biases serve as guidance, without which learners would be lost in thought. The current studies add more empirical evidence to this literature and highlight another bias in word learning, one that we observe with determiners, but likely applies more generally. Second, our findings further shed some light on the relation between typology and learnability. Our results are consistent with hypothesis 2, that learners are biased against a negative meaning of a determiner, whether or not it is superlative. This result on learnability does not map onto the typological pattern we observe in a one-to-one manner. Rather, we see a non-absolute mapping. This bias leads to learning difficulties in both 1 and 3, but over time, only a gap for 1 has developed. This concurs with the view that learning biases are probabilistic. Even bias-violating structures are learnable, just less likely to arise. This means in language acquisition, bias-consistent patterns might be acquired earlier, but bias-violating yet alive patterns must eventually be learned as well. The last but not the least implication regards to bias per se. The current study is neither the only nor the first study to notice such a bias against negativity. In fact, in language processing, many studies have reported that statements with negative meanings take longer to process. In language acquisition, for many positive-negative pairs, evidence reveals that the negative member is acquired more slowly than the positive counterpart. Here, in a current study, we showed that upon hearing "Liebest of the cows are by the bar," children readily entertained the positive meaning, but not the negative one. We speculate along the lines of traditional explanations that this is so because the positive meaning is the default, and computing the negative meaning involves a further step, manifesting itself as a learning difficulty. Several questions remain to be answered. A particularly noteworthy one is, what makes a word or phrase positive or negative? It has been suggested that the way our linguistic system encode content is closely related to our perceptual encodings. For instance, "in front" counts as positive as it describes the visible perceptual field, whereas "behind" is negative in describing the area out of sight. If so, we may expect the scope of this bias to extend beyond language. In fact, there are studies comparing the negativity bias between the linguistic domain and a non-linguistic domain, but mixed results were found. To better understand this issue, more cross-domain comparisons should be conducted with respect to the asymmetry of our perceptual encodings. That's it. Thank you.